And here's a game against another winless team. And here is a game that has, and I was telling David, I get a hard time figuring out what to think of the Broncos coming in, given the fact that they gave up 70 points and they lost by 50 at Miami, and now they come to Chicago. And you would think if the Bears have anything, we would see it. And yet, as you go through it, you wonder, do the Bears have anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great question because you're just not sure. Now, I think we need to keep in mind that they were playing one of the 2 or 3 very best teams in the league last Sunday on the road. So you do have to factor that into the equation here a little bit, but they simply haven't looked good. I mean, offense didn't look good in training camp. In terms of throwing the football, it hasn't looked good here during the season, and I think a path to victory Sunday at Soldier Field it follows, getting that running game going and just trying to physically beat down the Denver Broncos. You look at where they're at right now running the football, guys, and not a whole lot has changed from last year. Not a ton. David Montgomery's with the Lions. He had, 3 touchdowns last night? Did he score a 4th after I went to sleep? I don't know.
No.
But David Montgomery's a good back. You're not going to win because of him, okay? So the backs the Bears have are fine. They've got 305 rushing yards through 3 games. You go back to last year, through the first 3 games, they had 560 yards rushing, and that was before they started designing all that stuff for Justin Fields to run. Recall, that didn't happen until really like mid to late October when Fields started taking off and piling up big-time rushing statistics. So they're way behind the pace from a year ago. Part of it is they haven't been handing the ball off to the running backs quite as much. I thought, well, maybe they had a lot more snaps through the first 3 games last year, right? That would explain maybe why there's fewer handoffs so far this year. No, they actually have had like 10, 12 more snaps this season through 3 games than they did a year ago. So I think try to get back to what they had success with last year. The Broncos aren't going to give up 350 on the ground like they did a week ago at Miami, but you ought to be able to find some profits there, right?
Part of the problem with picking this game, Brad, is that Denver's such an aberration. What happened in Miami, I can't really recall, I guess because it hasn't happened in my lifetime, a team giving up 70 points and then bouncing back the next week. It is just weird that they got beaten that badly, and again, they lost by 50. So you would think that this is an obvious get on the Bears here because it's good to be at home and another winless team. But I don't know what the Bears are doing well, and they're going to be without what is it 2/5 of their starting offensive line no matter what. We don't know if Nate Davis is ready to go. He's a bit of a mystery, and we don't even know if that's going to improve them or if he needs conditioning time or whatever in order to get back running. And it's kind of confounding to figure out what the offensive line is going to look like.
I would think this is just a guess, and that Nate Davis plays on Sunday. He was he's been a full participant in practice both days so far this week. So I would think they get him back out there. I think the conditioning is a legitimate question, just based on kind of the combined amount of time that he's missed. But I still think he's going to play, and hopefully it's the best thing for him and for the football team. So, yeah, you've got the issues on the offensive line. Really, the injuries are they're really centered in 2 position groups. It's the offensive line and the secondary. Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson, as well as Josh Blackwell, the backup nickel, have not practiced yet this week. So that doesn't bode well for them, although we've we've got another practice coming up here a little bit later on the day. We'll see where they're at, but you're going to be short in the secondary, it looks like, against Russell Wilson, who playing better than he did last year in that kind of chaotic season with Nathaniel Hackett, but he's still not playing great. I mean, he's capable of making some plays, though. So, yeah, it's a real head scratcher, though, when you talk about 0-3 against 0-3. With some of the expectations that both organizations had. I don't think the Bears or Broncos thought they were going to be amazing this year by any stretch of the imagination, but thought that they would be more competitive through the first month of the season.
Capable of making plays, that could be descriptive of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I think you have the same kind of ways of looking at what they're capable of doing. Brad, if you were to pick one, which quarterback will have the biggest impact on Sunday's game?
Oh, man, I mean, wow. Maybe Fields, because the Broncos defense is just wretched, and you look at the depth chart and you're like, well, they've got to have some guys there that are going to be solid, and you're looking at the depth chart and you're like, holy smokes. Sean Payton got hired there. They gave him who knows how much money to take over as head coach, and he hired Vance Joseph as his defensive coordinator, and my oh my, it has gone south for Vance and that unit in a hurry. Now, part of it, I think, is personnel, right? That's probably a little bit of it, but it has just been an awful start for them. So I guess maybe Fields, but, I wouldn't have a ton of faith in either quarterback going into this game.
I really enjoyed your story about whether to dial up pressure, whether you can dial up pressure when you've got a compromised secondary. And even if everybody plays, they're all coming off injuries, it's going to be hard not to view it as sort of a compromised secondary. And even a guy like Brisker seems to go out for a number of plays every week. He just seems beaten up, whether he's on the field or not. And I wonder, Brad, what was your conclusion when you went through that in your own mind? Do you think that it's going to be hard? The old adage is always you defend a veteran quarterback and you attack a young guy. I don't know how you go after Russell Wilson with that secondary.
Yeah, especially if none of these guys come back. That's what it's like. You get these, hey, they got to do this. You hear all these, and then it's like nobody ever talks it through, like steps 2 and 3. And I'm not saying that pressuring isn't a good idea. Like, it is a good idea, but we got to talk through like all the steps here. And like they've had games here where it's been Elijah Hicks and Quindell Johnson at safety because Eddie's been hurt, Brisker's been in and out. Do you really want your 7th-round pick from a year ago in an undrafted rookie that you claimed off waivers from the Rams 3 weeks ago as your last line of defense while you're heating up the opposing quarterback? Like, there's some really bad things that could happen there. And that's not to even begin to mention the injuries at corner where, obviously Gordon is on IR. Hopefully it's just for 2 more games and then he can return. And so it's just tough because now you've got these guys out on an island, and boy, somebody hits a 55-yard pass against one of these fill-ins, and it's going to be like, well, who was the idiot that left that guy on an island? So here's the conclusion. The conclusion is they are getting inadequate play from the defensive line, okay? And those guys have got to be better. Yannick Ngakoue was supposed to be like this sort of missing element. No, and if you expected him to fix their pass rush woes, you were missing the mark by quite a bit. But he was supposed to provide something that they didn't have a year ago, and to this point, that hasn't happened. And so they are simply not winning enough one-on-one battles up front. They are not making plays on the football, and that's why the teams are just driving the field on them. They're not getting killed with chunk plays. Okay, they're not getting just absolutely beat up with these explosive plays. There's been a few of them and more than they would like, but the whole idea is make a play before the opponent gets to the red zone, and they're not making a play.
Inadequate defensive line, Brad? That's Eberflusian. That's really
well. I mean,
look
kind. I think I was a little more harsh in the article.
Yeah,
like,
you were.
I mean, it's just
you were.
They. Yeah, I mean, they.
I'm
just
glad you brought it.
Haven't gotten it done.
Yeah,
They're not winning. They're not winning one-on-one matchups, and so these quarterbacks are able to eventually pick things apart. And yeah, it's been bad.
All right, Brad, you can make football reasons. You can come up with reasons why the Bears may win this game. What was your conclusion, though, when you made your pick?
Yeah, I struggled with this one for a couple of days, figuring out which way I want to go. I mean, you got a Bears team that is not good, but is coming off a game against the Super Bowl champs, and a team that's had some injuries, the Bears. Then you look at the Broncos and you're like, well, how the hell do I look at them? Because they're not going to give up 70 every week, and so you're trying to put the two together, and that's just difficult. One thing that kind of caught my attention this week is the Bears there was mention that they needed to show fight, and I'm like, man, if you're talking about needing to show fight in week 4, I'm fearful that could be in low supply. I got Broncos 25-22.
How did the locker room seem yesterday? You said that Wednesday
I thought,
flat. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was flat on Wednesday. Seemed like a normal locker room yesterday, guys. Like if you walked in there yesterday, you wouldn't have looked at the way guys were and the kind of the tone and figured that it was a team with a losing record, right? Like it was.
Well, that's positive.
It was yeah.
But what did you make your guy Getty talking about them being close to being special? I don't. I mean, the kind of I know you have to stay upbeat, but strike a balance between. Come on.
And the head coach said, what was it, Sunday, I think, in Kansas City, that they were close, really close, or he said that on Monday, whenever he said it.
Monday.
And so that has sparked a bunch of people have asked basically like, well, hey, do you think they're really close? Yeah, so you got all these questions that are kind of built off of what Eberflus said. Like I said, when you guys asked me about Justin's comments on Wednesday, like the words don't matter at this point. They really don't. It's about what the team does on the field. Can they stop? Can they halt a losing streak? Can they have some better individual performances? Can they look more cohesive as a unit? And then if they get that first win, can they do anything with it? Can it be the start of a little bit of momentum? I'm not talking. This isn't crazy talk, but like, could they win back-to-back games? I don't know, and it's just hard to pick this team because if you were picking games through the second half of last season, you probably got hoodwinked once or twice anyway, and so it's really kind of reached for me. I got to see it to believe it situation.
This segment with Brad Biggs is sponsored by Estwing Professional Tools, made in the USA for 100 years, estwing.com. Brad, I hear what you're saying. I wonder if you sense an element of fear among the Bears. In other words, I would imagine that a Super Bowl coach like Sean Payton has a lot of pride, and we know that Vance Joseph's job is probably on the line in this game, and we imagine that other guys have been told that, my way or the highway kind of thing. That's not Flusie's style, though, is it?
Well, I don't think it's his style, and where are you going to go to get replacements, right?
Well, that's
the
it.
depth is a little bit of an issue for these guys. That's not the Bears style. He talks about got to get better with the details, so hopefully they can get detailed up. And one of the things Getty said,
what does that entail? What's detailed up?
Well, I mean, the upholstery's going to look pretty shiny. You're going to take care of the rim.
Yeah. Sweet.
One thing Getty said yesterday, though, is he said you go back and look at the tape, and the 7 or 8 plays where they had it was there for them to make an explosive play, right? And you've got one that's just obvious as day, the drop by DJ Moore, but there are other plays where you got 1 or 2 guys that just aren't doing their part on that play, and the whole thing falls apart. Like it was set up. Now, does that change the ball game? No, but maybe they'll lose by 10 instead of 31. I don't know. But so they felt like there were plenty of opportunities out there, and the real problem is they got a whole bunch of different guys making these mistakes. If it's one guy, you can. Hey, listen, you're going to have to sit out for a while. We're going to find somebody that can execute this for us. But it's been across the board, and that's problematic.